Hi, this is Mrs. Alexander, and this is your review PowerPoint for the end of Activities 2.3, Diabetes Management. The essential questions you need to be familiar with and the key terms are located on this slide. So make sure before the final that you've gone over the essential questions and the key terms and you know how to define them and use them correctly. We covered 2.3.1, A Day in the Life of a Diabetic. You had guest speakers come in that talked to you about their lives of diabetics, type 1 and type 2. They talked about the basic biology of the disease, what their typical day was like, their routines, restrictions, lifestyle, and coping. Be sure you study over that for the final. A1C. We briefly touched A1C levels in here, and so I want to make sure that you do understand there is a couple questions on the final in EOC about A1C levels. That includes what the normal level is for individuals between 4.5% and 6%, and what is considered diabetic. Anything in the 6s or higher is considered diabetic, and so usually whenever you're diabetic, the doctors ask you to stay between 5.7 and 6.4. That's managing it. However, if you're higher than a 6, somewhere between an 8 and 11, then you're not managing your diabetes. A1C is a blood test that you get done at the doctor, and what it can look at is it can look at the backup buildup of your glucose in your blood from the last 90 days. You can't rely on this test. You can't tell the doctor, oh yeah, my sugars have been great. This will actually look at the glucose in your blood. And so it tells the doctors how well you've been managing it. We covered hypo and hyperglycemia in class. We talked about high and low blood sugars. These terms or topics go right along with A1C levels. We also covered in Activity 2.3.2, Diabetic Emergency. What causes the emergencies? What do you feel like when you're having a hyperglycemia attack? How do you feel when you're having a low hypoglycemia attack? We talked about Anna, and we talked about 3 scenarios in which she was showing each of those symptoms. Be aware that anyone can have hyperglycemic and hypoglycemic attacks, not just diabetics. And so if you catch yourself feeling like that, make sure you know how to regulate by either drinking more water or eating a snack. Osmoregulation is how your body regulates the water through sweating, urinating, making you feel thirsty. That relates back to those words, isotonic, hypotonic, and hypertonic. And remember the key that I said, solutes suck. Solutes suck water towards them. That causes cells to shrink in hypertonic solutions. It also causes cells to swell whenever their insides are more tonic-y or more filled with solutes. And so the solutes that are in the cell can suck water towards them as well. And that's an example of the solution that they're placed in being hypo. So hypotonic solutions cause the cells to swell because they're sucking the solutes. The solutes are sucking the water towards them. And so again, solutes suck. Cells will shrink in hypertonic solutions and they'll swell in hypotonic solutions. Here's an example that we're going to do in class. You can pause the video here if we haven't done this demo yet, or you can just continue on with the video if we've already done it. It shows egg osmosis. On the left is an egg that has had the shell removed with vinegar. Same on the right, but then after the shells were removed with vinegar, we were able to use that thin layer that's around the shell, or underneath the shell, called the cell membrane, to observe osmosis happening. The egg on the left is smaller than the egg on the right, obviously, and that's because it was placed into a really sugary solution called a hypertonic solution. This is a perfect example of cell shrinking. The egg on the right was placed into a all 100% distilled water solution, meaning that the particles were removed and it was mainly water. That caused the cell to be hypertonic and the solution to be hypo, so the solutes inside the egg sucked the water into them. Here's an image showing a normal red blood cell doing the same, isotonic, hypotonic, and hypertonic. On the bottom shows you how the naked egg membrane does the same with the movement of water. Remember, osmosis is the movement of water. The solutes don't move, but the water does. The solutes suck the water towards them. So the picture on the left, you notice that water is moving into the egg. On the picture on the right, water is moving out of the egg based on where there's more solutes. Activity 2.3.3, Complications of Diabetes. We talked about rapid shifts in blood sugar and the different complications that can occur. Everything between your eyes to your feet. We talked about many of the long-term consequences and the different diseases that can be related. Overall, I hope you understood that a lot of the symptoms mimicked each other, that a lot of the symptoms of diabetes go along with all the different body organ systems and they're all interrelated. To review the essential questions for 2.3, make sure you're familiar with these key terms, again, and the essential questions that they ask. The good news for diabetics is that we have better treatments, earlier diagnosis, and if you're proactive about your diagnosis, you can figure out what techniques work better for you. The new research is being done every single day. There's no cure yet, but we're coming up with really amazing innovations to help with diabetes management and treatment. And that's your next task for Activity 234. Before we do Activity 234, innovations of diabetes management in the future, we're going to talk about some medicines that backfire. Understand that most of the time we have pharmaceutical companies and the Federal Drug Administration, the FDA, that helps regulate what medicines come on the market. Back in the day, there wasn't an organization to do this, and a lot of people ended up dying because of the medicines that backfired. So you need to ask yourself, does the medication do what it's supposed to do, and are there any harmful side effects? An example is DES in ovarian cancer. It was once given to pregnant women, and they gave it to the women if they thought that they might be at risk for a miscarriage. It was supposed to prevent them from having the baby too early and the baby dying. However, when they were using it, they found a cluster of individuals who reported all these symptoms. And most patients were young, middle-aged women. And so once they figured out those symptoms were happening, obviously they stopped using the drug. Radiation is another example. Using X-ray imaging to look inside the body started in the early 20th century, before we understood that if you didn't have protection on your body while doing radiation, you could actually get cancer from the X-rays. So radiologists had a higher rate of leukemia than their other counterparts in specialties such as this. And they actually did studies with animals as well to demonstrate this and to make sure they were correct. This brings us to Activity 234, Future of Diabetes Management. You're going to look up some of these innovations, new discoveries, and you're going to do some research on them. You're going to find out how they work and how they help diabetics. And that is the review for 234. Please make sure you go through all of my past PowerPoints, all of your past quizzes, and your conclusion questions to study for this college-level comprehensive final.